The sound of roaring motorcycles echoed down the back roads of a small town on the outskirts of the Arizona desert. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the rugged landscape. The riders, all dressed in leather jackets adorned with skull patches and rebellious slogans, zoomed past the empty highway like wolves on the hunt. They were the Desert Reapers, one of the most notorious biker gangs in the Southwest. Led by a man known only as Shade, the gang had built a reputation for terrorizing local businesses, intimidating anyone who crossed them, and living by their own code of lawlessness. But tonight, they would meet someone who lived by a different code, one that had seen more violence and brutality than they could ever imagine. At the center of this quiet town stood an unassuming building, a single-story structure with tinted windows and a modest sign reading Surveillance Systems, Inc. On the outside, it looked like any other tech company offering security solutions to businesses. But beneath the surface, it housed something far more significant. A state-of-the-art surveillance operation that monitored everything from government facilities to high-profile individuals. All from its underground bunker. James Razor Turner was the man in charge of this operation. He wasn't much to look at, an unremarkable man in his late 30s, with dark eyes that never seemed to blink, his sharp jawline concealed by a day-old stubble. On the surface, he looked like a simple techie, a quiet soul lost in the glow of computer screens. But beneath his calm demeanor lay the mind of a soldier who had been to places where nightmares were born, and who had seen things that had turned the toughest men into shadows of their former selves. James had served 2 tours in Iraq, where he had earned the nickname Razor for his ability to make quick, precise decisions in the heat of battle. He had been trained to kill with surgical precision, to think in the most extreme situations, and to never back down from a fight. When he returned from the war, however, there was no place for men like him in the civilian world. He had too much blood on his hands, too many memories that wouldn't fade. So, he found a new calling, working in the shadows, behind the surveillance cameras, tracking the movements of criminals, spies, and anyone who posed a threat to the country. He was the quiet sentinel, the ghost in the machine, always watching, always waiting. But little did he know, his life was about to collide with the violent world of the Desert Reapers. It started on an ordinary Tuesday evening. James sat in the surveillance room, staring at multiple screens that displayed real-time footage from around the country. He sipped his coffee in silence, his mind focused on the patterns of the data in front of him. It was a quiet night, but he knew that silence often meant trouble. As if on cue, the alarm rang out. Unauthorized vehicle entering the restricted zone, the system's automated voice announced. James immediately punched a few keys, his fingers moving with fluidity born of years of muscle memory. A map appeared on the screen, pinpointing the location of the breach. It was on the outskirts of town, near a small, isolated diner. He zoomed in on the footage. A convoy of motorcycles had pulled up to the diner. The bikers, their faces obscured by helmets, looked like they were making trouble. The gang's leader, Shade, dismounted his bike and stormed into the diner with a group of his men. James watched closely, his fingers hovering over the controls. Something felt off. The bikers weren't just here for food or fun. They were here for business, something darker. He zoomed in on their interactions, watching their every move through the lens of his surveillance system. Shade had a grim look on his face, and his men were tense, their hands twitching near the weapons hidden beneath their jacket. They weren't the type to simply pick a fight over nothing. This was serious. James leaned back in his chair, his instincts kicking in. He had been trained to read the signs of impending violence, and this situation had all the hallmarks of trouble. He activated the comm system and dialed the local police. As the phone rang, he kept his eyes on the bikers, knowing that he couldn't afford to let them slip away. "Yeah," a gruff voice answered on the other end. Detective Harris, this is James Turner. We've got a situation at the diner. Biker gang Desert Reapers. They're causing trouble. I recommend sending a squad car out, ASAP. I'm not sending a squad for a bunch of bikers, Harris replied, his voice dripping with disdain. You've got eyes on them, don't you? Just keep an eye on the situation. Let us know if anything gets out of hand. James frowned. He wasn't the type to rely on others, especially when it came to threats like this. But he knew he needed backup. He hung up, but his focus never wavered from the screen. He continued to track the bikers, waiting for something to happen. He didn't have to wait long. One of the bikers inside the diner stood up, raising his voice in a threatening manner. The others followed suit, and it was clear that something had gone wrong. The situation was escalating rapidly. James zoomed in on Shade, who was standing in the middle of the diner, his arms folded across his chest. It looked like he was making demands, and the cashier behind the counter appeared visibly shaken. Without thinking, James pulled up the diner's security system. A few keystrokes later, he had control of the building's cameras. He could hear the muffled sounds of shouting and glass shattering through the speakers. His mind raced. The situation was spiraling, and he needed to act fast. In a flash of decision, he sent a message to the building's exterior cameras, triggering the floodlights around the diner. The sudden burst of light illuminated the parking lot, blinding the bikers momentarily. Shade cursed under his breath and pulled his men out of the diner. They rushed to their bikes, ready to make a quick getaway. But James had one more move to make. As the bikers revved their engines and prepared to speed off, he engaged the remote lockdown feature on the diner's doors. The steel shutters slammed down with a deafening crash, trapping the bikers inside. "What's going on?" Shade roared, banging on the door. James knew he didn't have much time before the bikers figured out the trap. He picked up the phone and dialed Harris again. "You're going to want to get over here now." "I've got the Desert Reapers trapped inside the diner," James said calmly. "What the hell did you do?" Harris growled. "We'll be there in 5 minutes, but don't do anything crazy." James didn't listen. He knew the Desert Reapers. He knew their type. They weren't going to just sit and wait for the cops to arrive. He needed to end this now. In an instant, he dropped the phone and activated the diner's panic button. A high-frequency alarm blared through the speakers, disorienting the bikers further. James didn't know how much longer he could keep the situation under control, but he was ready for whatever came next. Seconds later, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. The Desert Reapers had made a mistake. They had messed with the wrong soldier, a man who knew how to handle far worse than a gang of bikers. As the police swarmed the diner and the bikers were apprehended, James watched from the surveillance room, his fingers still hovering over the keys. He knew this was just the beginning. The Desert Reapers would be back, but next time, they wouldn't be so lucky. James Razor Turner was ready.